Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Brandon Cobb, and today I've got Dave Dubeau on the show. He is a real estate capital raising expert. He's also an author and the podcast host since 2012. That means he's one of the OGs in the podcasting world. He's helped over 200 real estate investors raise over $325 million in private capital. Now, through his new Capital Convo podcast service, Dave's helping syndicators leverage a podcast to consistently book 20 plus accredited investor calls per month. So I'm excited about this just because you're not raising capital. If you're listening to this, it's not just about that. This is more along the lines of high ticket sales. So if you sell or potentially are going to sell a product that is high ticket, then this is going to be some really interesting stuff that I'm excited to dive into with Dave today. Welcome to the show.
Brandon, thanks so much for having me on the show. It was my pleasure to have you on mine a week or two ago. So, yeah, this is great. It's great to be on yours.
Yeah, I want to just cut straight to it. So I've been podcasting for, I don't know, 3 years now. We've done a couple hundred episodes. I've probably been on 200 other people's podcasts. I can tell you that I'm definitely not getting 20 accredited investors per month, booking calls with me, though. That's not the sole purpose of the podcast.
Yeah.
Let's just dive into the basics here because I know you've got a really good book called How to Get 20 Accredited Investor Meetings Every Month Utilizing Podcasts. What does the framework for that look like?
Yeah,
Just
perfect, Brandon. Yeah,
starting
it's
out.
it's pretty simple, and I'll just break it down into three steps, all right? Step number 1 is we create a show, a podcast that appeals to our ideal avatar, in our case, accredited investors, as a guest on the podcast. So it's all about them. It's not about us as real estate investors. It's not about syndication. It's not about that kind of stuff. It's a show that appeals to high income, high net worth individuals. So we kind of have to back out a little bit and figure out who are those people. And you know perfectly well, Brandon, right? So we're looking for successful business owners. So what does that look like? Well, in my case, we're looking for business owners that have been in business for 10 plus years, have 10 plus employees. Your criteria, because you want seven figure business owners, might be a little bit higher than that. But to meet that accredited investor standpoint, I'm guesstimating that if somebody's been in business for 10 or more years and they have 10 or more employees, they probably fit that criteria. Then
Yeah.
we also look at successful professionals. So the usual ones, right? Doctors, orthopedic surgeons, cosmetic surgeons, dentists, lawyers, successful CPAs, those kind of high income professionals, ideally middle aged and above, so they paid off the student loans. And that's who we're focusing on as well. And then C suite executives of big companies, 300 plus employees, those C suite type people. So those are kind of the people we're going after as our guests. So then the question becomes, what do those kind of people want to talk about if they're going to be on a podcast? So we kind of theme our podcasts around professional success, personal success, financial success. So those are three things any of those people can talk about, right? What's their secret sauce in business? What's their secret sauce for connecting personal and work life and having maybe some sort of little bit of balance? And then what's their success sauce when it comes to financial stuff? And that's where we really kind of get into the magic for our purposes. So that's step number 1. We create a show that appeals to those kind of people as our guests. And then the second thing is we want to find them and invite them to be guests on our show. So instead of doing a weekly show, the way that we're getting our clients 5 accredited investor meetings a week is we're getting them 5 people booked on their show every single week. And I know, Brandon, you've been podcasting for a number of years. That might sound overwhelming, but the way we do it is we make sure that it's efficient. So we time block 2 2-hour blocks a week where our clients have these interviews back to back on Zoom. So they're doing 2 or 3 interviews a day, twice a week to make up that volume. Is this making sense? So the
Makes
way we
sense. Yeah.
find these people, we got our criteria: successful business owners, successful professionals, successful C-suite executives. We go out, we find these people usually on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest place to kind of identify them. Then we go through a whole bunch of rigmarole to scrape leads, find emails, find phone numbers for these folks, and then reach out to them in multiple different channels via online, via LinkedIn, via email, via direct phone calls to invite these people to be guests on the show. Okay. And again, it's all framed around what's in it for them. And this really is kind of a cool thing. Like, you've been interviewed on a couple of hundred shows. It's no big deal for you anymore, Brandon. But what we find is the average successful person has never been invited to be a guest on a podcast. In
Yeah.
fact, we had one client, we got him an interview with a $1 billion fund manager who had never been invited to be a guest on a podcast before. The guy was thrilled. The guy was a little bit nervous. So imagine this scenario. So there's our client, Matt, a syndicator, and this gentleman comes on his show. And before they start the recording, just like you and I did before we started recording here, you have a little bit of back and forth. So Matt got to put the gentleman at ease, calm him down a little bit because he'd never been interviewed before. And the whole positioning was reversed. So instead of Matt being nervous because he's wrangled himself into some sort of a sales meeting and he's trying to convince this guy to look at his deals, now this gentleman's showing up eager to meet Matt, excited about it because Matt is going to interview him on his show. So, what a perfect way to shortcut the know, like, and trust factor, at least the know and like factor, very,
Yeah.
very quickly by doing this interview. So then they had a great conversation. It was short and sweet, about 20 minutes, very nicely choreographed. So it goes over personal success, or sorry, professional success, personal success, matching that work-life balance, and then talking a little bit about financial success as well, specifically around, what are you doing to create other sources of income outside of your job, outside of your business, that sort of thing, without getting too proby, just kind of opening up that conversation. So that's step number 2, is you find these people, your ideal avatar, and instead of trying to convince them to come on, have you do a sales presentation to them, we invite them to be a guest on the show. All right. And then you have a nice interview. And then step number 3 is converting those conversations, those interviews, into capital, because that's the whole purpose of this. So it really is kind of a 2-step thing. So the first thing is we do the interview. And then after the interview, when you're still on Zoom with the person, you're still chatting with them, then it's like you circle back and you say, let's say, Brandon, give me an example. What's an example of one of your ideal investor avatars?
A lot of our content is geared towards 7-figure business owners. Probably 30% of our investors are
So
in
without
that
giving me a name,
avatar.
just give me one example of maybe one first name and what kind of business that guy has.
Tony HVAC.
HVAC company. Perfect. All right. So Tony, you're a very successful HVAC operator. So I've interviewed you, Tony. We're just pretending here. We've talked
Mhm.
about your secret sauce when it comes to HVAC and what you guys do differently and better than competition. Then, you're a busy business owner. How do you manage that personal life, business life balance, or if there is any, or what's your thoughts on that? And then we start talking a little bit in the interview about the financial thing. So, Tony, a lot of gentlemen in your position, they're doing really, really well with their businesses, and you're kicking butt with your HVAC business. With Tony, I'd probably be a little more colorful in my speech, but So, Tony, a lot of successful guys like you, they're looking at, they're making really good income from their business, but they want to kind of keep that income up without working so hard. So, what are your thoughts about that? What are you looking to do either now or in the future to kind of enhance or replace that income with non-work income? Then Tony talks about whatever they may or may not be doing. So, I'm reinvesting everything in the company, or I'm dabbling with stocks and bonds, or I'm fooling around with the crypto, or whatever they talk about. Okay, just talk about that. Then at the end of the interview, after we stop recording that, and we're just kind of wrapping things up with Tony, I'd say, hey, Tony, yeah, so this episode will be coming out whenever, and here's the next steps. And oh, by the way, you mentioned that you're, starting to create some other sources of income through investing in stocks and bonds. Let me ask you this. How do you feel about the kind of returns you're getting with those investments, the stability and the security of that? Is that something that you're 100% happy with, or is there maybe a little bit of room for improvement? What's Tony probably going to say?
Oh, there's always room for improvement.
I don't care who. You can interview Warren Buffett, and he's going to say there's always room for improvement, right? You say, well, okay, cool, Tony. So we're doing something really interesting with busy, successful business owners like yourself in the alternative space in apartment buildings. I can't remember, Brandon. I think that's your thing. Are you doing syndications of apartments or what do you?
We do affordable housing land development. So
Land
that's our
development.
main
Okay.
niche.
All right. So land development. So we're doing something really interesting in the alternative space with land development. Here's the greatest thing, Tony. It's solid, it's secured by real property. There's massive demand. We're short 2 million housing units in the country. And it's very, very stable. It's very, very consistent. Plus, we're able to get our investors significant tax breaks. Is that something you might be interested in taking a look at?
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Boom, book them into a follow up discovery call, which is where you show them what you're up to. Does that make sense, Brandon?
Yeah, makes sense. So you transition the conversation because on the podcast you're asking them, so what are you doing to not work forever? What are some of the steps that you're taking to, retire, one day? So you're kind of pulling all that information out during the podcast while it's live, and then after everything's over, you're kind of transitioning it into, hey, how are those doing? Have you looked at alternative investments? Is there room for improvement? Hey, this is what we're doing. Love to show it to you if you're interested.
Yeah, and we just really want to keep it very, very superficial. We don't want to get into explaining anything right there and then. We just want to pique curiosity, get them booked into a follow up discovery call where you can really kind of show your stuff, show your thing. And then we got to also be a little bit cognizant, Brandon, that we don't go directly for the kill immediately, so to speak, right? We're, going from interview to discovery call to $100,000 investment probably isn't going to happen that fast. But what we do want to do is see if there are serious prospects, if they're seriously interested. So what we do on that discovery call is explain like a typical deal. I wouldn't try to sell them one specific deal right now. I'd show them how it works, right? How it works big picture and say, okay, so Tony, is this something that looks like it might be interesting for you at some point? Tony might say yes. Okay, cool. Then I would get Tony to fill out with me either an expression of interest right there, non-binding, but just getting them to kind of fill something out shows me that they're not just a tire kicker. Plus, I can just kind of
This is on the discovery call. This is
this
the
is on the
second
discovery
call that
call.
you're
Yeah,
on.
yeah, on the discovery call. And then just kind of make sure they fit our criteria of an accredited investor. And then we add them into our VIP investor prospect list. So, Tony, you're going to get first dibs on any opportunities that come down the pipeline. Would you like to be able to see those first? That's kind of the pitch. And we get them signed up for our newsletter or whatever it is, whatever the next step in your drip sequence is.
Yeah, and this works for any type of client, honestly. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be for raising money. This could be for any type customer, probably more for those high ticket sales because it's very one to one, right?
Yeah.
In order to get
Yeah.
that high ticket sell, which in the capital raising world, usually your minimums are $50,000 when you're raising. So that technically qualifies as a very high ticket sell. Any other product or service you're doing, it's a great way to find customers when you're first starting out. You build the backbone of the podcast. So you got your podcast going. You mentioned that the first step was to reach out to people. You've got your target avatar, which is accredited investors. Some people might say that that's too broad. A lot of what's taught in the capital raising world is to really niche down and have a specific target avatar. And while accredited investor is kind of a niche, a lot might argue and push back to you to say that that's too broad. You need to
Yeah.
have the words doctor or lawyer, something that cuts through the noise so that when you're reaching out to people, it's like, oh, it's a lawyer podcast and I'm reaching out to just lawyers. One of the biggest mistakes I think I made when I first started was when I was raising from a lot of my network is I didn't have that target avatar. I was a medical device sales rep. That would have been a perfect avatar for me to go after because I could reach out to them and instantly
You could
have that
speak their lingo.
rapport and that connection. So, I mean, what do you say to people who say that the accredited investors is just too broad of a target avatar?
I say they're right. So I got to qualify that. So thanks for catching that. So we do a couple of things along those lines, Brandon. We can either focus geographically and a little bit wide, like I mentioned about it. So, for example, we've got a client, Tim. He's in Phoenix, Arizona. He's a syndicator there, does multifamily stuff. And Tim loves to connect with people in person. So he loves to meet and greet, shake hands, go to coffee meetings, go out to lunch with people, that sort of thing. So he really likes connecting with local high income, high net worth individuals. So in Tim's case, his whole show is revolved around Phoenix Prosperity Podcast. So that's kind of a broad thing, but it's narrow in its geography. So within Phoenix and the surrounding Scottsdale and the surrounding areas, we go after business owners, professionals, executives, but it's geographically based. So that's one example. So yeah, kind of broad, but very narrow geographically. So that gives us enough people to fool around with it. We don't have to worry about running out of guests for his show, right? The second option is just like you mentioned, focusing on one specific category of people. So we got another syndicator client, Tudor Franco. His show is Stellar Success Leveling Up for Medical Professionals, right? So geographically, we don't care. We go nationwide, anywhere across the US of A, but we only focus on medical professionals. And that's who we get booked in on his show. So you can kind of go one of those two ways.
Okay, so you do hammer down a little bit more towards that specific
Absolutely.
profession or whatever it is.
Either
So once you
geography or profession. That's kind of what we go after.
Okay. Yeah, if they're more localized, you'll stick to that area, and if it doesn't matter, then you can go nationals. So, what are you teaching in your program on how to reach out to these people? I know LinkedIn is probably the most popular platform for, the whole career profession type stuff. It's our number one platform that, we use for raising money from our from anybody that reaches out to us that's interested in it. So, are y'all utilizing Sales Navigator to plug in the different filters for the professions and then have it shoot out those
Absolutely.
messages for you? Is that right?
No, we're not doing it. We're doing it more old school, but we are using Sales Navigator. But we actually have assistants personally reaching out and doing all of this stuff manually. So yeah, I don't. Well, I do teach. I guess I've got the free book, and people can learn all about this. But I kind of quit teaching stuff years ago, Brandon, because most people don't have the time or the inclination to spend it all learning how to do stuff and then implementing it and then tweaking it along the way. So these days we just offer turnkey done for you service to do all this stuff for you, build the podcast, fill it up with your ideal avatar, produce everything, and then just have it set up so you're the host with the most. Yeah,
Gotcha. Okay. So you guys are like the turnkey solution, laying the
correct.
solution. You're like, we are the solution, right? We've already
Exactly.
figured this out. We've done it. We can
We'll
take care
we'll
of that.
build it
It's
and run it for you. Yeah, so you can just
okay.
yep.
And so y'all are turnkey where y'all are actually booking the people on the show as well. It
Yes.
sounds like. So
Yeah.
the person who hires you guys doesn't even have to worry about that. You're going out, you're doing the cold outreach. Is the cold outreach from y'all's company or is it coming from the person whose podcast y'all set up?
Yeah, it's coming from the person whose podcast we set up. So we're reaching out on their behalf. But we do something kind of cool now, Brandon, for people that are just kind of thinking about getting into this. So we start off the podcast with a 6-week sprint. So when we first build out the podcast, let's say, for example, we're working with a syndicator and they've got a track record and they've got a bunch of happy LPs that have made money with them in the past. First thing we do is we focus on who they've already worked with. So we get their existing and past investors booked in as guests on the show. We get them to do 10 or 15 of these warm interviews first with their existing and past investors. And this accomplishes a ton, Brandon. So, number one, it gets our client some practice, some friendly at bats so they don't have to sweat it too much. They already know these people. Number two, it creates a bunch of content so we can launch their podcast with 10, 12, 15 episodes already done. Because as you and I both know, most podcasters fizzle out after 6 or 7 episodes. I think 60% of podcasts never make it past episode 7. So kudos to you for being a couple of hundred episodes in.
Yeah.
So it creates, so bang, we've got momentum right from day one. But here's the cool thing. The goal is to get an immediate return on investment for setting all of this up. So the third big thing it does is this is a great opportunity to reconnect with those investors and potentially get them to re-up, to reinvest again in a new deal that you have. I've had several clients that's happened to them. One of my clients, Desi, he interviewed a lady who's been investing with him for 2 years. And he didn't even ask at the end of the interview. They're chatting after they stopped the recording. And she said, you know what? I'm going to put another 50 grand in with you guys. And she moved it from the stock market into Desi's fund. And bang, he didn't even really have to ask for it. That just happened. But if you proactively encourage that, it's going to happen a lot more. So you can get reinvestment. You can get warm introductions and referrals to that person's network, right? Instead of trying to get them in on a sales call, we invite them to be a guest on the podcast, right? So that works very, very nicely. And the third thing is, and this is huge, this is an amazing way to get video testimonials. So when you're chatting with your investor at the end of the show, you've stopped the interview recording, but then what I show our clients to do is just do a quick recap of the latest deal that you've done with that investor and remind them how it worked out, assuming that it worked out well, right? So Tony invested $100,000 with us in ABC project back in 2023. That's all wrapped up. So you've got, X disbursements of X amount. So your cash on cash return was this. And then at the end, we gave you all of your money back plus a nice bump of 40%. So your overall return on that investment was whatever. Okay. And then here's the trick, Brandon. You press record again on Zoom and you ask Tony some open-ended questions. So Tony, how do you feel about the investment that you've done with us? Let Tony go on. Da, 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 da. Okay, how does this compare to some of the other investments that you've been involved in the past, or stocks or bonds or whatever else you've invested? Da 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 da. Okay, I know you're a little bit nervous about getting into this investment initially. How do you feel about it now? If somebody were asking you, what would you say about this kind of investment? Da 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 da. And then you say, hey, Tony, you said a few really nice things in there. Would it be okay if I use some of that as video testimonials, some little sound bites from that? Would that be okay? Tony's probably going to say yes. And then boom, you just take that, you edit that down, and you get some really, really good video sound bites, some video testimonials from that as well.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, that's an easy way to get video testimonials from your investors. That is a nice little trick.
Oh, it's so tough to get, like, because the normal way of trying to get testimonials is an absolute pain in the ass for everybody, right?
Yeah.
And I've done this the wrong way before, so I learned the hard way, right? It's, hey, Tony, really appreciate you being an investor. Hey, buddy, would you mind writing me a testimonial about your experience? So Tony's going, oh, crap. That's another thing on my to-do list I don't really want to
Yeah.
do, even if he likes you and even if he's happy with it. It's one of those things. Maybe Tony isn't great at writing. Maybe Tony doesn't know what the hell to say. Maybe Tony, so he's going to procrastinate about this. Then you're going to chase after him and you're going to bug him, which is the last thing you want to do to your Tonys of the world that are investing big bucks with you, right? So it becomes this naggly thing in the back of Tony's mind that guilts him and gives him a negative feeling about you, which we don't want, right? So this
Yeah.
is just a massive shortcut.
Yeah, I love what you said about the referrals. It's also a good way to ask for referrals after you've had the conversation. Hey, by the way, we got some stuff we're working on. Do you know anybody who might be interested?
Yeah.
That you could introduce us
Or
to. We Go ahead.
or not even directly to get their friends and associates to look at the deal. They say, hey, Tony, I know you hang around with a lot of really successful business guys locally. Do you know anybody else who might be interested in being a guest on my show?
Mm.
And then you get your foot in the door that way. You interview Tony's buddy. At the end of the interview with Tony's buddy, you say, hey, you know what? By the way, Tony is one of our investors in our alternative investing things. He's loving it. Is that something you might be interested in taking a look at too? So you don't go direct for the referral to an investment. You go indirectly, get a referral for their friends to be a guest on your show, and then you do that piggyback thing at the end. Once you've created that connection, that rapport, a little bit of that response, that relationship.
Yeah, it's funny. People don't ask for referrals enough. And I can tell you, it's probably the most powerful thing you can do in the capital raising business. Not a
Yeah.
lot of people utilize referrals because how easy is it to close a referral? I think I have a 100% close rate on
Wow.
all the referrals, and that's one of our number one things we do whenever there's a return of capital back to the investors. We hop on a call, we interview them. It's funny. We literally do some of the stuff you're preaching right here.
Hopefully
We
you're
hop on a
recording
call.
those. You should
Yeah.
be recording those interviews.
We interview them
Yeah.
and we actually ask them at the end of the interview about how the investment went, what could have been done. It's just like, hey, how did things go? Is there anything we could do to improve? We want the customer experience to be even better. How do we do that?
Yeah,
And at the end, we're
exactly.
like, hey, do you know anybody else that you would feel comfortable introducing us that would like to just learn more about this stuff? Great. Who are they? Hey, can you make a warm introduction? Perfect. And we've gotten so many referrals doing that simple thing. Other thing I see that's worked really well is when we have investors that we don't know that have not invested with us, potential investors that book a call with us, we go through the whole sales process, right? And kind of like you said, we're not pitching anything. We're just learning more about them. We're learning if this is going to be a fit. We're answering any questions that they have. And then at the end, and this goes against everything that I thought to do before I started doing it, you ask them for a referral at the end. Just
Yeah.
because they haven't invested money with you doesn't mean you can't ask them if they know anybody else that might want to learn more that they might introduce us to, because they do. That's the crazy thing. And
Yeah.
I've gotten so many referrals from people who've never invested money with us, but I ended that call asking for the referral that led to them introducing me to somebody who ended up investing with us. Pretty wild.
Yeah, it is. And I think the only thing that this might improve on that is this is an easier ask, right? Because when we're asking for a referral, the person knows that at the end of the day, yeah, it's to invest and it's 50 to 100 grand. If we're asking for a referral about a guest on a podcast, they're actually providing their friend with massive value up front
Mhm.
by getting them free PR, free marketing, free exposure. So it's a much easier ask for you and a give for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it makes it a whole lot easier getting them on there. Very cool. So, what are some of the big points what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people making when they're on the discovery call, right? So they
Mm.
have this target avatar come on the show, they interview them. It's an authentic, great interview. They've done the successful transition. Are you interested in this kind of stuff? You want to learn more? And they say yes. So they book the discovery call. They have it. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see capital raisers make on those discovery calls, or just high ticket sales in general? Because it's a high ticket sale.
Yeah, for sure. So specific to capital raisers, they several big mistakes. One big mistake is jargon, real estate jargon,
Eh,
right? So
yeah.
we're knee deep in this stuff 24/7. We're all real estate nerds. We love this stuff. We understand NOI and IRR and cap rates and all this stuff. And we forget that 99% of the rest of the population does not know what that stuff means. They've
Yeah.
heard of it, but they don't really understand it. And we assume because, Tony's running a $20 million HVAC company, he's pretty financially astute, which he is in the HVAC business. That doesn't translate to the real estate investing business. So the challenge is we start using this jargon in our presentations, or we start getting too much into the data and we start getting too much into all this kind of stuff. It turns people off. Like it becomes a snooze fest for them. They feel stupid because they don't understand the jargon and they're too embarrassed to ask you what the jargon means. So they just nod along and then they don't invest because a confused mind always says no, right? So
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest problems I see over and over again. A lot of syndicators are really good at underwriting, they're really good at analysis, crunching the numbers, and the way they present their deals is just boring as snot. It's horrendous, right? So that's big challenge number one. Challenge number two is trying to go too far too fast, right? So this is like the first date. We're not trying to get the person, we shouldn't be trying to get the person to marry us on the first date. That's too much of a stretch. So what we want to do is we want to have very clear process in mind and goals in mind. So that's why I tell my clients, your goal from the discovery call is not to walk away with a check for 100 grand. That ain't going to happen, right? The
Yeah.
goal of the discovery call is to get a warm commitment from that person. It's either, yes, I'm interested in being on your short list of investor prospects and getting first dibs at first looks at deals, or you know what? No, I'm really not interested in this at all. Either one of those is fine, but we don't want people kind of, we want to get that warm commitment, which means that they've filled out some sort of little form or an expression of interest or something like that that gets them into our system. So kind of like whatever your CRM is that you're getting people signed up for your investor prospect list. You kind of walk them through that in the discovery call, fill it out with them if you want, but share your screen and just walk through that with them and then boom. So that's the goal, not the $100,000 check today, to get that warm, yeah, yes, I'm interested kind of commitment, and then get them in the system and then follow up. I mean, you come from sales, Brandon. It's the fortune definitely is in the follow up. So making sure that you're inviting that person to webinars or sharing specific deals with them that are coming up and just keeping in touch on a regular basis.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you hit it perfectly. Yeah, those discovery calls are all about them understanding their needs and then just matching the benefits and leaving that call like, hey, honestly, one of the things that I really like doing is pointing out a concern maybe that they have or something that they need and picking out something that we can't satisfy. Like, hey, for us in land, it's, depreciation. We don't offer that. You can't depreciate land. That's not a thing. And
Yeah.
so if they say that on the call at the end, I'll be like, honestly, I just want to make sure this is a fit. But you said that the depreciation thing was pretty important to you, and honestly, I don't know that we're a fit because we can't offer that to you.
Yeah.
So that's one of my biggest concerns is we're just not going to be able to offer you the depreciation. And then usually if they've liked what they've heard, because there's other compelling reasons about land development that might
Yeah.
not be offered with, multifamily or commercial or some of the assets that they can utilize the depreciation. They're like, oh no, it's fine. It's good. Yeah. Send me what you want. And they'll kind of sell themselves because they want to see some of
Smart.
the deals are. It's very
Yeah.
cool. If people want to learn more about you, Dave, learn more about your book, how to get 20 accredited investor meetings every single month, where can they go?
Oh, thanks, Brandon. So, yeah, I've got a website set up with a free copy of the book. I'll trade it to you for your name and your email address. And you can get that at 20accreditedinvestorsbook.com. Again, that's the number 20 accredited investorsbook.com.
All right. We'll make sure that that gets posted in the show notes. Dave, thanks for coming on the show today.
Brandon, thanks so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.